Babaji placed his hands upon my father's head and slowly lifted it so that they could look into each other's eyes. Tears spilled from my father's eyes as a golden light spread throughout the room. Soon I began to tremble, as did my brothers James and Joseph the younger. We sat very still. Slowly the heavens opened to our inner vision, revealing rank upon rank of angels, masters, and saints. Next, we saw a corridor of light open to our view, and we were invited to follow Babaji. Hi, and welcome back to Empowered Spirit Healing. My name is Paula, and today we're continuing on with episode 12 of reading Anna, the grandmother of Jesus. Last episode was really quite cool, listening to some of Jesus's or Yeshua's adventures in Britain and India. And he, at this point in the story, he is still in India and he is about to meet Babaji. So I'm really, really excited to read this chapter to you. So let's just get straight into it. Chapter 29, Yeshua Meets Babaji. Later that evening, Yeshua gathered us together again and said, "Now, my beloved ones, I will share more fully about our experiences with the great master Babaji. You have heard of him through my grandmother, Anna, and my grandfather, Joachim. My father's words concerning Babaji were few. I did not know why my father spoke so little of this one. Yet, when we met face to face at the abode of one of his disciples, I began to understand. This great master, who is known as the immortal yogi, appeared to be a young man in his 30s who had clear brown eyes and long black hair. So powerful were the energies that emanated from his presence that I could barely maintain my conscious state. When I saw my father go to him and kiss his feet, I began to see my father in a new and revealing light. Babaji placed his hands upon my father's head and slowly lifted it so that they could look into each other's eyes. Tears spilled from my father's eyes as a golden light spread throughout the room. Soon I began to tremble, as did my brothers James and Joseph the younger. We sat very still. Slowly the heavens opened to our inner vision, revealing rank upon rank of angels, masters, and saints. Next, we saw a corridor of light open to our view, and we were invited to follow Babaji. By this time, I was aware that Babaji's form had changed into the most luminous body I had ever beheld. Directly before us was the sun, a radiant orb of intense light, of intense white light. The central energy began to spin, gathering us into its vortex. Then we were taken into the very center of our solar system's sun. There we were greeted by beautiful solar beings who said they were known as Helios and Vista. That's interesting because in one of Dolores Cannon's books, I believe one of the Convoluted Universe books, she also mentions that there are beings that live on the sun, but they're like a very light, etheric kind of being, because you would have to be able to withstand that kind of heat. But yeah, it's just interesting to hear it mentioned in this book as well. And so Yeshua continues with his story. After we had been taken into and had merged with the sun, we were returned back to our bodies. Babaji smiled and assured us that this was the first of many such journeys, utilizing our sun as an interdimensional portal. Turning directly towards me and raising his hand, Babaji beckoned me to come forward. My father took my place beside my brothers and my uncle Jacob. As I went forward to lie prostrate before Babaji, my hands upon his bare feet, communicating telepathically, he then gave me the Maha Mantra, I am the light. Gently, he laughed and touched a finger to the crown of my head. As if it were a lightning bolt, a piercing light shot through Babaji's finger, striking me mute. So I remained for many weeks. Wow. James, Joseph, and I, together with our father and our uncle Jacob, remained with Babaji for a full year, having experiences I am informed from within that I am to hold in my heart. After the year had passed, Babaji told us that it was time for James and Joseph the younger to return to the temple in Benares. There, Joseph would continue his Ayurvedic studies, and James' path would unfold among the monks at the great library within the temple complex, where he would abide until it was time for us to return home. Uncle Jacob was asked to accompany them, resume his studies with James, and prepare for travelling to other sacred sites. After my brothers and Uncle Jacob left, Babaji became mysteriously quiet. My father and I had few interactions with him physically, but on the inner planes we were constantly together. We spent most of our days in meditation, eating little food, bathing in the ice-cold water, and tending to a small garden. We slept very little. Then one night, when the moon was full in May, my father and I were called on the inner plains to attend a gathering within a sacred valley high in the upper Himalayas. There we experienced our bilocated bodies coalescing to stand around an altar. A chalice and bowl were on the altar. Behind the altar stood Gautama Buddha and one who announced that he was called Maitreya Buddha, a representative of a lineage of energies called the Cosmic Christ. As I looked, my very core melted. I wept. The door of my heart flew open as if all eternity revealed itself. Through the door of my heart, a gentle, clarifying wind blew, transforming my being. Then I was told telepathically that I must bring my physical body to its valley, where I was to enter a monastic community far removed from the world. My father turned to me and took my hands, pressing them to his lips. Tears flowed. Our hearts merged as we went outside, walked off a distance, and lay beside one another upon the snow. When we awoke, we noted that the snow had melted from the great heat that abided in us. All around us, in a circle 12 feet in circumference, there were white alpine flowers growing in an emerald field of fine cropped grass. They gave forth the sweetest perfumed scent which filled our nostrils and nurtured our lungs. Then our consciousness returned to our physical bodies. We opened our eyes and gazed at one another, lying on our pallets in the small room. How long we simply gazed and drank each other in, I know not. Perhaps we might have continued in this manner indefinitely, except that a soft knock attracted our attention. Babaji entered carrying thick woolen robes, fur boots, and leggings, and empty leather packs. He said it was time to go into the retreat of the masters whom we had met last night. Little did I know that my beloved father Joseph would not be returning with me. I was so taken up with the exquisite, tantalizing feelings of being with a true avatar that I hardly noticed my father's loving looks, which spoke more to me in hindsight than in those few remaining months we had together. So it was that Babaji escorted us through extraordinarily high mountain passes. Finally, we came to the sheer wall of a granite cliff that had foot and handholds carved into it. It was required of us to rope ourselves together, take off our packs, and then pass our packs along on a rope to the first one who arrived at the other end of this precipitous passage. However, this was not the last test of our determination to arrive at our destination. After several more days of long trekking, we came to a deep gorge where we could hear the distant echoes of a roaring river below, which appeared as a thin white ribbon. There was no bridge. Nothing could be seen that would convey our mortal bodies across this narrow chasm. Wow, that's terrifying. I sat down, puzzled and somewhat downcast. How Babaji erred. I searched his glowing face, which was expressionless except for a twinkle in his eyes. I looked at my father. He too gazed back at me with no hint of being disturbed or unsettled by our state of affairs. All of a sudden, a great weariness came over me, which I recognized as primal fear. We had come through snowstorms that seemed to part before us, allowing a warming sun to bathe us as we passed through. Even an avalanche had been turned aside at the very last moment. Just as I was about to lose my composure. Now how were we to carry on? I knew there was no turning back. I closed my eyes and went deeply inward, commanding my mind to be still and my heart and belly to relax. A great wind arose, tearing at us as if to send us flying. Flying. Yes, that was it. Then I looked inwardly and saw Babaji gathering the elements and the forces of gravity. With my inner vision, I could see him creating an etheric bridge across the chasm. And then I opened my eyes. There was no sign of him anywhere. Makes me think of Frozen when Elsa's creating the frozen bridge up the mountain so she could climb it. Remembering that the different dimensions and all forms within them are simply energy vibrating at different frequencies, I shifted my focus of perception by changing the frequency of my consciousness. Looking through my third eye, I saw him walking in mid-air as calmly and confidently as if he was strolling through a grassy meadow. My heart raced with excitement. I already knew about such things as levitation and teleportation and had achieved a certain measure of success at levitating my body. I still had much to learn about teleportation. Now, with my increased inner vision, I was really seeing how such things were done. I just think that is so incredibly fascinating. And this explains his journey of learning how to walk on water. This is all part of it, all part of that learning. It's just so incredible. And there are many stories of many avatars that have been able to do things like this. It's mind-blowing because, you know, in this day and age, we just think that's magic. But people actually out there can actually learn how to do this. It is possible. It just takes a lot of discipline and initiations to get there. Then I realized that my father was preparing himself to step off the edge of the abruptly ending trail by shifting his dimensional focus to a more subtle realm of being. He looked back towards me and smiled. Yes, my son, you too can do as you see me doing, were the comforting words he transmitted to me telepathically. Was I sufficiently prepared? I would soon find out. The wind stopped as I watched Babaji and my father walking confidently across the expanse of seemingly empty space. Babaji had almost reached the other side when I felt a whoosh of spirit building an enormous sense of lightness through my body. It felt as though I were more air than clay. I began to sense my feet rising. Yes, I was levitating. And as I looked down at my body, I could see through it as if I were a ghost. With my attention fully on the etheric forms of Babaji and my father, I placed one foot ahead of the other out into space. At least this is what it would have looked like to you. But to me, it was as though I were walking on solid ground, although it was more like what you might think walking on a cloud would feel like. I proceeded slowly, keeping my breathing very even. I felt suspended and supported. What a marvel. What a marvel indeed. Wow. When I arrived on the other side, neither Babaji nor my father looked at me. With their physical bodies reconstituted, they simply continued onward. Yeah, just everyday life for them. I paused, breathed in the manner I had been taught to recalibrate the frequencies of my subtle and physical bodies until my perception of the physical plane was as it had been before. I admit that I was a little disappointed at first, that I was not acknowledged for accomplishing this great feat. That's interesting to see that, yeah, he might have all these incredible special gifts, but he's still human. He wants acknowledgement. Don't blame him. Then I realized that this was a gift of spirit, not my ego's doing. So I accepted and acknowledged the one who works the ways of miracles. I prayed for sincere humility, brushed off any thought of false pride, and followed behind my father. Oh, I just love that. I think that's so cool and just absolutely incredible. But then it's a reminder, we can achieve things in life, and that is wonderful. And, we can be proud of ourselves, but be proud of ourselves with humility by still being humble and just remembering it's our ego that wants to be fed, that, not us. And anything that we are doing, really, it's not us. It's God, it's universe. Sorry, just excuse little Biscoff barking. We just have to remember that we are a channel. We are a channel of the universe, creator, God, source, whatever you want to call it. But that is channeling through us. And so anything we are doing in our daily lives is really source. It's the same with healing work. So I do healing sessions for people. I do remote quantum healing sessions. And it's not me that's doing the healing. I'm just simply a channel, and I'm just allowing the light and healing energy of the creator to come through me and to help people. And so, yeah, I just love that shared. And, even Yeshua had those little moments and had to move through them. Onwards we walked for several more days. At last we arrived at a high vista point that overlooked a green valley. As we descended, the trail became paved with large, smooth flagstones and round river cobblestones. Grasses and blooming shrubs softened the endless horizon of towering granite escarpments and distant snow-capped peaks. With every step, my strength renewed with increasing vigour. Sweet birdsong greeted my ears and the buzz of bees and flies. With the descent, the dwarf scrub brush gradually turned to stands of shade-giving evergreens and broad-leafed trees. Cascading streams and waterfalls fed verdant fields, which pastured all manner of animals. When I was in an altered state of consciousness, dreaming, or really present in my physical body, I will leave for you to determine. As for myself, all that I experienced felt as real as sharing with you now. I was very happy to find myself in the lovely valley I had experienced before with my inner vision. In this valley was a small village filled with some of the happiest people I ever met. Perched on the narrow terrace of a sheer cliff was the monastery that I was told would be my new home for an indefinite number of months. Babaji motioned to the attending monks above to lower the large basket that was used to haul us up with the assistance of a winch and pulley. Upon climbing out of the basket, I was pleasantly surprised to find Babaji and my father passing through an inconspicuous door. Out of the indigenous stone was carved the entrance of a beautiful temple, which was located in a former cave of large proportions. I stood in awe and wonder. It was simply designed, yet resplendently decorated with statuary of the deities representing the many attributes of our Father, Mother, God. One of the monks then showed me to the monks' cells and invited me to leave my pack in my new home. I noticed that the monks who served here wore different robes, denoting some were Hindus and some were Buddhists. Babaji then escorted us back to the village, where we entered a small house that served as Babaji's residence whenever he visited this sacred valley. My father was invited to refresh himself with a warm bath, a gentle massage, and a nap. When I sat in the quietude of Babaji's small cloistered garden, this comfortable yet very modest home would be my father's temporary abode. Now, as I look upon your nodding heads and yawning mouths, I shall bid you a restful sleep. I invite you to return on tomorrow's eve for the conclusion of my story, said Yeshua as he placed two sleeping children into the arms of their parents and walked quietly to his room. Now we are up to chapter 30, Joseph ben Jacob's Ascension. My dear ones, peace be with you. We are gathered together in this fashion so that we may be fed as the shepherd feeds his flock. So may we receive gladly of this feast of glad tidings that lies before us. I shall now share with you the most treasured memories of what I experienced during this past year in that beautiful and peaceful valley in the high Himalayas. Wow, that sounds like a really amazing place to live. My father and I lived comfortably in our respective places. We were in constant communion with the masters and their consorts, male and female, seen and unseen. We walked with Babaji daily. We held vigils every night as we embraced all humanity in our hearts and extended our prayers of light to Mother Earth. It was our deepest desire to facilitate a peaceful evolution for this beloved planet whose birth pangs are great. The memory of the last days I spent with my earthly father is like precious treasure held in my heart. I would have you know that my father and I witnessed many people in their light bodies from every quadrant of the planet come to this great ascended master retreat, joining with us while their physical bodies lay sleeping. We were all given instruction and prepared for our various tasks. During the night, you also go as spirits to various ascended master retreats to be tutored and given assignments, which you fulfill while your physical bodies and minds slumber. I am come to support your awakening through my example so that you may consciously play your important roles in the light of day. As summer approached in the high Himalayas and the time for our departure drew near, Babaji took me to a very remote cave where I was to remain alone for an indefinite time. There was snow all about and freezing temperatures all day. I took no food and only minimal raiment. After removing my boots, I was led into the dark recesses of the cavern. I could feel the energies of many initiates who have come before me. There would be no fire and no source of light or warmth. Babaji bade me remove my cloak and arrange it as a cushion upon which to sit. Then he anointed me and rubbed my naked body with ashes. Interesting. After blessing me, by placing his hands upon my head and shoulders, he departed from the cave and rolled a stone over the entrance. Wow. So that is very much like what happened after the crucifixion. So this must be preparation for that. I was in total darkness. The cavern was fairly large, and a gentle draught of air circulated from some obscure crevice. Right away, I set myself the task of surrendering my will to the source of my being. Well, what else are you going to do? Laying in a dark cavern that you are literally locked into, and there is no food, no water, no light, just a bit of air coming through. Whew, I mean, just reading that and picturing that in my head is literally bringing up fears for me. Whew. Although I knew that I could teleport my body out of the cave, I was resolved to come to know the Father, Mother, God of my spirit, transmute any lingering attachment to my physical body, and learn further of my mission. So I slowed all my vital signs as my grandmother Anna taught me in my youth. And instead of lying in a sepulchre, I remained seated in a full lotus posture. I felt comfortable and blissful, although I did not know how long my body would be enclosed within the cave. I did know that my consciousness was free to enter the vast realms beyond time. I also knew that my body's angels would carefully attend it. Wow. So I have recently been learning a lot about an ancient spiritual philosophy, I guess, called Kabbalah. And I'm finding it so incredibly fascinating. And what I'm learning, the most important thing to do is to build a vessel of certainty of the Creator. So it's basically having trust and certainty that no matter what happens in your life, even the challenging times, even the difficult things that happen, and when you feel like your life is falling apart and life is so hard and you're just struggling, with Kabbalah, they teach you to take a deep breath, to pause, and instead of reacting, because so many of us just react in situations like that, we are taught to just pause, to go within and say, this is great, this is good, this is happening for my highest good. And, you know, a logical mind would think, well, things are falling apart, life is bad, I've got no money, or my relationship's just ended, or my kids aren't talking to me, or whatever it is that's going on for you, you lost your job, whatever it is, it's really hard to sit there and think, oh, good, this is great. But that's the challenge that Kabbalah gets you to do. You need to sit there and actually think, okay, this is happening for my highest good. And I have been practicing a lot lately of just surrendering to the Creator and just trusting that whatever is happening for my highest good. And even though things may be painful and may be uncomfortable, but that is where the growth happens. When things are going great in our lives, that's almost like a reward for the work that we've done previously. And that's great, that's fun, but no growth can happen there. The growth happens in the darkness. So I'm actually starting to get to the point now, and I sound like a crazy person, but I'm starting to get to the point now where I'm actually looking forward to those negative times, those times of downfall, of stress and depression and anxiety that I so easily fall into, and so many of us so easily fall into, and looking at it as, yes, this is a chance to transform. This is a chance to grow and to elevate to a higher consciousness. Because if we never experience these difficulties, we're never going to grow. We're just going to stay where we are. And I believe that that's what all these initiations were about. What Jesus and uh, Anna and Mary Anna and Mother Mary, all of these amazing people and their husbands, of course, all of these amazing people that were a part of the Ascension community and other communities that do these initiations, they were doing it. They were choosing to put themselves into a place of darkness. They were putting themselves into a cave where they had no food and no water and nothing, and all of your fears come up. Everything just comes up to face you. There's nowhere to go. You've just got to sit there and deal with it and face it. And that sounds like horrible torture, but it's actually so incredibly empowering. This is where the growth happens. So they put themselves in these situations so that they could ascend even faster. We're just doing it through our everyday life. And every day we can experience something. We can be on the road and somebody could cut us off, and we can choose to respond or to react. Most of us react and put the finger up or be like, F you, stuff you, you're so rude. Or we can just sit there, we can pause, and we can just say, this is happening for my highest good. Maybe they're in a rush. Maybe they're in a hurry today. Maybe they've got lots going on. Maybe they're stressed out. And just calm and just not take it personally. It's not about us. Sometimes people are just in a hurry and they've got a lot going on. We've all been there. We've all been in that situation. So I think having some compassion and understanding for people, instead of judging people all the time, think, well, if I was in their shoes, would I behave like that also? Most probably. It's so easy to sit in your life and just say, oh, I would never be like that. I would never do that. I used to be like that about mothers. I used to look at them with their parenting their child, and the child's chucking a tantrum in the shopping center, and I was just like giving them the side eye and just like, oh my God, I would never let my child behave like that in public. Boy, did the universe have another lesson for me, because I've had several tantrums in shopping centers with my children, because that's just life. That's just what happens. It's all part of the learning and the growth. They need to have those tantrums. It's a test for you, because they're testing you to see how far what your boundaries are. That's part of children's learning. They need to test where the boundaries are, what they can get away with, what they can't get away with. And so now, I look at the parents and I'm just like, ooh, I kind of feel bad for them. And I'm just like, that sucks, but it's just part of the learning journey. And so I think that's what this is all about. And, for anybody out there who's interested in learning more about Kabbalah, I highly recommend watching this guy called David Guillaume. I started watching him maybe a few months before Christmas, and he has just completely changed my way of thinking. And in the past, I would just go through these really down periods that would last for a long time. And now I'm trying this new approach. I'm seeing it as an opportunity for growth, and something that might normally take me a few days or a few weeks to get over is literally I'm getting over in an afternoon. It's incredible. And just seeing that, yes, this is an opportunity to transform. So by Yeshua being put into this cave, this was forcing him to embrace the darkness and to create and to transform, to create light in the darkness. And that's how we all need to do this. So anyways, enough of my rambling. I'm going to continue on. While thus meditating, I was assisted to awaken to the remembrance of the divine being I am. As you are and the whole of life, my entire body began to intone the Maha Mantra. I am the resurrection and the life. I continued to meditate on those words until I knew with absolute certainty that I am the resurrection and the life. While I was practicing this mantra, my father appeared to my inner vision. Gradually, he began to look more and more like a very tall pillar of light within a great sphere of golden white light. I could see that his physical body remained seated just as my grandfather Joachim's body had when he passed into the light. As he slowly lifted his etheric arms, as would a crystalline butterfly, a golden white light radiated from his heart. I could feel this great light enter my heart as if it were a tidal wave of love. This experience would be a blessing of comfort to me through all my days. Then the brilliant shaft of light coming from his heart became a dazzling, expanding ball of light, which began rotating incrementally faster and faster. It gradually encompassed my father until no further distinguishing features could be seen. Then slowly, ever so slowly, my father's essence lifted up until he entered into an even greater sphere that I recognized to be our son. I felt great ecstatic joy. No thought of sorrow crossed my mind. It was not until after Babaji came for me and I had returned more fully to body consciousness as I was walking away from the cave that I realized I had witnessed my father's ascension from the physical plane. A silent and tender Babaji escorted me to the place near the temple where my father's body lay. It did not smell of death, but emitted a sweet fragrance as of lilies. For a week. Then his body was placed upon a great funeral pyre of flowers and wood, as is the Hindu custom. In the consuming flames, the elements of our Earth Mother returned from whence they had come. And so it was that I gave my love and honour to our father and our mother's husband at his passing. Let us pause now and offer our prayers and psalms to the memory of Joseph ben Jacob. And so do I now give you a witness that death is nothing and that our Father lives on. Believe as you choose. Of this I am now certain. Every initiate embarked on the journey into self-mastery must remove the last vestige of fear concerning physical death. I am come to invite you to follow the example my Father set, and that I shall set for you, thus fulfilling all things. I realize that some among you are skeptical. You question and doubt my sayings because I appear to be human, and one of your relatives, the son of a carpenter. However, it is only because you have forgotten your own empowered divinity that you question my sayings. But I say to you, in a time yet to come, when I have accomplished all the masters showed me, I will come to you and will give you an inner witness. Whether in this body or another body, in a time far distant, your soul shall come to know my Father, Mother God, who has sent me to be an example of eternal life. I shall leave you to contemplate and rejoice in the good news that I have given you. James, Uncle Jacob, and I have returned safely into your midst. Our brother, Joseph the Younger, abides in India, where he renders valuable service to the multitudes as an esteemed physician. Let us, everyone, say a prayer of thanksgiving for all that is ours, for we are amply provided with every good thing. I am here on the earth plane to do my Father's will, and to prepare the way so that you may return to the one who is calling you to rest from your soul's long journey. So I have shared my treasured memories with you, even as though fulfilled all and more than was my intention when I set out on my pilgrimage to India as a young man. With the assistance of my beloved father, Uncle Jacob, my brothers, and my wonderful teachers, I have matured in wisdom and self-mastery. I now understand the wondrous workings of my physical and subtle bodies. I have witnessed the power of focused and expanded states of consciousness that accomplish what would be called miracles to most people. I have always enjoyed the nurturing beauty and touch of the feminine nature in women. Now I have come to honor my own internal feminine that continually balances my masculine. Now I have come to honor my own internal feminine that continually balances my masculine expression. My heart has been open to the suffering of the world, and with compassion I honor every soul's path of evolution. I have overcome my mind's fear of death. My remaining desire is to open myself completely to Father Mother's presence. That desire prompts me to leave you again next spring after making an appearance and an offering within the Temple of Jerusalem during Passover. I am called to pass through the desert of the Sinai, renew acquaintance with the brother sisterhood there, and then proceed to Egypt for further initiations. Until that time I am with you. We have plenty of time to become reacquainted. Let us now make merry and celebrate our many blessings. Come, my little ones, let us go to the table and partake of the sweet refreshments my beautiful mother has laid out for us. Come, my brothers and sisters, let us take up our instruments and sing a glad song. Praise to be to the Father Mother who gives birth, sustenance, and homecoming to all life. Wow, that just actually makes me really emotional. I don't know, it's just really incredible what he has learned, what he has gone through. And I just have such a strong desire to learn and understand all of this. I mean, I remember as a little girl sitting in the church. I had to go to a Presbyterian church. That's just what we grew up with on my dad's side. And on my mum's side, she took us to various different churches. So I've been to quite a few different churches. And I remember just listening to the stories about Jesus, and I was amazed, but I just always felt like with all the so-called miracles that happened in the Bible, I always felt like there had to be some kind of an explanation for it. And I've literally always wondered that my whole life. And then reading this book has just literally answered how these incredible miracles happened. And yes, they might still appear as miracles to everyday people, but to those that have studied, the initiates, the people that have gone and studied the occult, that it's just knowledge. It's just understanding things from a different perspective. So it's just incredible. Anyways, let's continue on with chapter 31, Yeshua's Egyptian initiations. The weeks in which Yeshua abided with us after his return from the Himalayas were profound and enlightening to all who were in communion with him. So we're back to talking from Anna's perspective. We all benefited by his presence as he continued to grow in spiritual stature and strength. We encouraged and delighted in Yeshua's frequent visits to Carmel, one of his preferred destinations as he travelled and acquainted himself with the diverse populace and countryside you call the Holy Land. On the spring equinox of AD 22, part of our family gathered to celebrate at Mary Anna's home in Nazareth. Yeshua announced he would be travelling to the Sinai and Egypt for an extended stay, and that he might include a visit to Greece before returning home. As we discussed Yeshua's approaching pilgrimage, it was decided that many of us would go to Jerusalem for Passover. So we gathered as a caravan and made our way to the gated city, which was outwardly magnificent but inwardly corrupt. Although Yeshua had visited Jerusalem with his father on numerous occasions, it was the first time I had accompanied my grandson inside the city of David. On the day before Passover began, Joseph of Arimathea and I walked with Yeshua through the ancient narrow streets thronged with all manner of pilgrims, merchants, and Roman soldiers. Needless to say, Jerusalem was radically different from the way it had been 600 years earlier when I first came to live there. During Passover week, Yeshua, who was now almost 25 years of age, spent most of his time in the court of the scribes discussing, reading, and expounding upon the law and the prophets. The elders marveled at his knowledge and wisdom. Some taught to test and discredit him, setting snares whereby they might catch him. Throughout it all, my grandson maintained a calm, assured manner. When least expected, he would insert a parable or a riddle or a joke to lighten the air. As the days passed, crowds began to gather around him to hear his words. The high priest of the temple looked on with a grave expression. and sometimes knitted brow. Who was this young man of Galilee? How was it the one from Nazareth could expound the scriptures with such authority? The high priest became increasingly anxious as he began gathering information concerning Yeshua. They're feeling threatened. It was customary for any man designated as a rabbi to be married in order to officiate in the synagogue or temple. Although Yeshua was not married yet, sincere questioners, skeptical interrogators, and awestruck listeners began to address him as rabbi. For the most part, everyone marveled at the breadth and scope of my grandson's teachings, which opened the well-worn scriptures to expanded heights and practical application. Thus the people began to wonder about this one who had come into their midst. Could he be the teacher of righteousness, prophesied? Some continued in their self-righteous skepticism, while others turned to Yeshua with a flickering hope for liberation, awaiting a charismatic leader's light to kindle their hearts into a bonfire. Yeshua was aware that the time had come to begin gathering his team of active supporters and to do whatever was required to prepare him for what was coming. Except for the prophetical writings and the small glimpses that Yeshua and the close family had received through the years, little was known about what lay ahead. Yet there was a knowing that being well prepared for any eventuality would see us through our challenges. Those of us who had been initiated in Egypt lent our understanding to Yeshua, which supported his inner guidance that being in the temples of the Nile was his next step. We remained in Jerusalem for 3 weeks. Joseph of Arimathea hosted many of us in his 3 Jerusalem residences. During this time, Yeshua met with a number of his cousins and friends to discuss his traveling plans and to invite them to accompany him on his pilgrimage to Mount Sinai and Egypt. Of these, John ben Zacharias, Lazarus, Judas Iscariot, and several others from the Qumran community planned to go as far as Mount Sinai, where they would stay until guided to return to Qumran. Miriam and Nathanael had much earlier declared their intention to accompany him. Their son Benjamin, who was in his 5th year and who was born with a crippling palsy, would remain with me in Mount Carmel. Mary Magdalene had also expressed earlier that she was guided to accompany him. However, they would not accompany him to the temples because she and Miriam had already taken the initiations that would assist them to support Yeshua. They, together with Miriam's husband Nathanael, would stay in Heliopolis with their aunt Miriam. James ben Joseph and John ben Zebedee both expressed their desire to undertake advanced initiations in certain of the Egyptian temples. And almost at the last moment, James ben Zebedee and his friend Andrew ben Jonah also chose to join the pilgrimage. Let me remind you again that such journeys as Yeshua's pilgrimage to Britain, India, and Egypt could not have happened were it not for his uncle Joseph of Arimathea's business acumen and generosity. Because we as Essenes were accustomed to communal living, in which harmonious collaboration and the sharing of our abundance was practiced daily. It was possible for Yeshua's support team to come together easily and to prepare harmoniously for their expedition to Egypt. It was arranged that the companions would depart with Yeshua on the next full moon. Word was sent ahead to my daughter Miriam that Yeshua and a number of relatives would be traveling to her home in Heliopolis by the way of Mount Sinai. Joseph of Arimathea hired several clever and trusted guides to oversee the journey and outfitters, provided enough camels, horses, oxen, and donkeys, plus conveyances for everyone's comfort. Along the route to Mount Sinai, Yeshua's company rested at a small at a number of small isolated camps and communities. At the various stopping places along the southerly inland trade route, there were followers of the way of the teacher of righteousness, who were overjoyed to give their hospitality. When they reached the foot of Mount Sinai, some of the elders recognized Yeshua and remembered him as an 8-year-old youth taking initiations there. Everyone welcomed into the peaceful Sinai sanctuary that has served humanity for eons. A remnant of the brother-sisterhood of light continues to this day to endure the isolation and hardships of this place in order to serve humanity within its powerful planetary vortex. There were several of Yeshua's companions who took initiations at Mount Sinai, and all were invited to read the scrolls and tablets of the monastery's rather extensive library. Numerous scrolls from the Carmel and Qumran libraries had been sent as gifts, while the others were used in exchange at the Sinai, Heliopolis, and Alexandria libraries. Except for John ben Zacharias and the brothers from Qumran, who stayed on at Mount Sinai, the pilgrims then trekked northward along the Red Sea. They travelled primarily before and after sunrise, resting in the afternoon and early evening in order to avoid the scorching heat, until they reached the welcome comforts of Heliopolis, which served as a primary home base and rendezvous point. Relatives gladly opened their homes and provided support without recompense for those who would be taking initiations. They welcomed Nathaniel Bartholomew's carpentry and masonry skills, and Mary Magdalene and Miriam's help with the household. My granddaughters also saw opportunities to serve the infirm and gave much of their time to carrying on the healing work throughout the surrounding community. Egypt was well known for its pure essential oils and medicinal practices, so these tireless women were happy to replenish their healing supplies and to gather more knowledge. Mary and Miriam also met with some of the priests and priestesses who had initiated them earlier. On certain feast days of Isis and Hathor, they participated in the ancient rituals dedicated to the Great Mother. When possible, Nathaniel also joined them. Yeshua and the other 4 male initiates, his brother James and John ben Zebedee, and Andrew, met with key priests who could pass on the necessary empowerments and who could mentor them along the way. Because Nathaniel's choice was to support Yeshua in a different way, he only occasionally participated in these meetings. Although Mary Magdalene and Miriam would not be accompanying Yeshua, he often included them because he valued their wisdom and mastery. It was determined that all the initiations would be taken in the traditional manner that begins in Nubia, far to the south. Now let me explain the process by saying that the ancient Egyptians saw the Nile as a metaphor for the human body, particularly the spinal cord and its more subtle neural pathways. They knew that the path enlightenment begins at the base of the spine and like a river flows upwards towards the brain. So it was that they constructed temples that simulated the journey of enlightenment. In this case, because the Nile flows from the south to the north, the initiate would begin their journey in the south and proceed through the subsequent temples, culminating at the Great Pyramid, represented at the Holy of Holies in the brain. Isn't that absolutely fascinating? So that these buildings that were built in Egypt, they were designed to be as part of the path of enlightenment. Just nothing is done by mistake. So much thought goes into all of these things, and we just have no idea these days. As each temple, the initiate experienced the various initiations which tempered, refined, and opened the life force channels in order to progress to the next temple. The initiates proved that they were ready to meet, unify, and alchemically transmute the opposing forces of love and fear, light and dark, spirit and matter, life and death. Although all the temples enacted the Osirian mysteries, each temple enacted a particular aspect of the archetypal journey of Osiris, Isis, Horus, Set, and Hathor. These mysteries involved light conception, crucifixion, and resurrection. Yeshua and his faithful friends travelled up the Nile, sometimes by barge and other times by foot or by donkey, in order to avoid turbulent cataract white water, until they arrived at the temple of Isis on the island of Philae. This was a long and arduous journey, one that very few of the native Egyptians ever accomplished in a lifetime. Again, I will say that the magnitude of this pilgrimage could not have been accomplished within such a relatively short period of time if it had not been for the companions' spiritual readiness, communal cooperation, and the financial funding they received from Joseph of Arimathea. Yeshua, James ben Joseph, and John ben Zebedee underwent their initiations at more or less the same time at the same temples. Because they had already taken advanced initiations in India, the additional experiences in Egypt further refined their consciousness and strengthened their constitution and character. Now that they were in the motherland, out of which all they had learned in India had come, they humbly and gratefully received any added portion that could be gleaned. Their consciousness was opened to the subtle energies of the mythic archetypal realms, and they were tested accordingly to the practices of priesthoods in those days. Although much of the original power of the ancient mysteries had been lost, the purity of the Osirian, Pythagorean, and Sibylline orders was maintained by a secret remnant of high initiates and adepts who still functioned as officiators when required. Great beings of the brother-sisterhood of light facilitated the rites of initiatory passage on the inner planes. I will now share some highlights that occurred in several of the temples that Yeshua later described to me. One of the first temples encountered was Kom-Ombo, the initiation chamber of the crocodile god Sobek. Having successfully passed the qualifying tests to enter the path of the initiate at the temple of Isis and Osiris, the novices were then required to test their intuition and face their greatest fears with regard to physical survival. They swam underwater through a labyrinth passage that passed through a pool of hungry crocodiles. Okay, I would not be passing that initiation. Through the process of mastering the lower centers of their animal nature, which clings to security, lust, and competitive power, the heart and intuitive centers were cleared and opened. In this way, the initiate was prepared to receive the higher alchemical energies that activated greater spiritual powers. Wow. The goal of this work in the temples was to attain enlightenment, as the archetypal high god Horus demonstrated, while he attained his higher spiritual body called the Sahu. The halo depicted around a saint's head, or the hooded cobra at an Egyptian deity's forehead, symbolizes the attainment of the Sahu, and the precursory light anointing called the Uraeus. Activating the Sahu and Uraeus also signifies that the initiate has been anointed with the brain centers by a very high vibration that permanently changes neurophysiology and consciousness, thereby allowing the experience of conscious immortality. This is just mind-blowing. Those souls who have attained this mastery are called a Christ, a Buddha, or ascended master, whose destiny it is to function openly or secretly as a planetary server. Wow, yeah. Yeshua knew that the same path Horus followed was also his own. In fact, the similarities between Isis and Osiris and his own mother and father as well, Horus and himself, were strikingly clear. Because of his experiences in India, he knew that he was well on his way to achieving his highest immortal light body. It's just incredible, isn't it, to learn that this is what he had to go through and experience in order to become Jesus. So for those people out there that think that Jesus is just your normal, everyday person, it's like, wow, he is not your normal, everyday person. He really went through a lot to become the Christ consciousness. Now you can see that the initiations that prepared Yeshua, or any initiate, past and present, have very little to do, if anything, with religion. Yeah, it's got nothing to do with it. I don't remember sitting in Sunday school and learning about initiations, that's for sure. They have everything to do with changing one's fear-based perceptions and behaviors. An initiate who was once perceived a limited, self-centered identity awakens to having compassion towards all life as an expression of the divine self. The path of enlightenment requires an ethical and expanded relationship with self, others, polarities, time, and space. So it was that, having successfully completed the arduous initiations at Kom Ombo, Yeshua and his companions proceeded down the Nile to other temples, including Edfu, Luxor, Karnak, Abydos, and Dendara. At Dendara, they lingered for 6 months in the temple dedicated to Hathor, the goddess of healing love. Here, the primary focus was the opening of the heart center through the balancing of feminine intuition and masculine intellect. This union of polarities was achieved by cultivating and disciplining sexual energy balance through love and mindfulness. At the Hathor temple of Dendera in Yeshua's day, the young initiates were invited to bring their sexual energy forward in order to master their powerful, procreative life force. This was done only after passing increasingly difficult preliminary tests. When the initiates' hearts were sufficiently clear and open, meaning much of the subconscious shadow material had been brought up into the conscious awareness and healed, they could then engage in ecstatic rituals with the Hathors through interdimensional contact. Wow, that sounds a bit crazy. Sometimes initiates remained in the temple of Hathor at Dendera for months or years until the tests were successfully passed and various astrological conditions were ideal for certain individual and group initiations. As a consequence, Yeshua and his companions abided at Dendera for 6 months, learning more about the keeping of time, the goddess Hathor's cycles and rituals, how to channel life force and sexual energy, sekhem, within the body. Yogic disciplines of breathing, postures, toning, and chanting, meditation, tantric arts, internal energy practices, purification and cleansing of body, mind, and soul were given. For those who sought full enlightenment in order to be of service to others, initiates were also given higher levels of regenerative practices, sexual energy practices, and the conscious conception, birth, and rearing of children. You may have never heard of these unconditionally loving ascended beings, but they are very active today, assisting humanity and Mother Earth through the ascension process. Their expertise with sound healing and the alchemy of transmutation through love is available to anyone who chooses to call on them for assistance. On the occasion of Yeshua's last initiation at Dendera, I bilocated my consciousness in order to be one of the Hathor high priestesses who witnessed this most beautiful empowerment. When you are ready, like my grandsons and granddaughters, you may also realize internal empowerments, such as those the Hathors facilitate, according to your asking and belief. That's the end of chapter 31. What another absolutely mind-blowing chapter. All of the chapters, really. Wow. It's just keeps getting more and more. You know, you think that you've learned a certain amount and you're like, oh my God, wow, that was mind-blowing. That was eye-opening. That was planting seeds. And then it just keeps going each time you keep reading. And also, it's also very interesting for me to reread this book several years later. It must be going on about 3 years since I read this book. And my learning has taken a very different direction since then. I mean, I'd learned a certain amount spiritually then, but then since then I have grown and learned so much more. And then reading this from this perspective, it's just, I think a lot of this, I was listening to the audiobook and I don't think I absorbed everything as much back then because I think it was just too much for me at that point. But since then, I have learned about multidimensional quantum healing, and I've been learning more about the occult, and I've been learning more about Rudolf Steiner's work, which is anthroposophy. I've been learning heaps about Edgar Cayce because I'm doing the Edgar Cayce series with my friend Jennifer. And there is just so much more I'm learning all the time, especially in spiritual science, which is really, really fascinating and talks about mystery schools and these kinds of initiations. And so the more I'm learning about all of this and then reading this book again, it's just like, wow, it is just mind-blowing. I'll have to read it again in a few more years and it will probably take me to an even deeper level. So anyways, I hope that you are enjoying this book as much as I am. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye.